begin tonight with Catanduanes in a state of ruin as Typhoon Rolly battered the island province with strong winds and torrential rains during the weekend. Our correspondent, Romel Lopez, is on the ground to give us an update. Romel, kamusta dyan?
Yes, Robbie, that's true. Catanduanes is still in disarray after Typhoon Rolly struck the island province. Most of the residents are still in state of shock days after Rolly's onslaught. The trail of destruction that Typhoon Rolly had left in its wake can be seen clearly in the aerial footage with the help of the Philippine Coast Guard. From the skies, the state of devastation is apparent. Buildings with weaker materials will plumb to the ground. Smoke even plumbed from some of the structures. Trees, if not uprooted, were left bare. And most of the houses no longer have roofs. Concepcion's house, in fact, was flattened to the ground. During the thick of the typhoon, Concepcion thought she and her husband were about to meet their end.
Sabi ko, siguro katapusan na namin ito. Nagtago kami dun sa, hindi ko maintindihan. Tulak ako ng tulak yung bintuan dali, basag na. Yung bintana namin, basag talaga. Mabuti, hindi kami tinmaan ng salamin. Nagkasugat-sugat na lang pati dito sa paa.
Catherine and her children, meanwhile, hid under the dining table during the entire ordeal. All she wants right now is to speak with her relatives in Pampanga.
Tago ang dalawang batang tinago sa baba ng lamesa. At talagang takot kami. Sige kaming dasal. Dasal kami ng dasal para lang makaligtas kami.
Catanduanes has been placed under the state of calamity since Monday. At least 30,000 families in the province were badly affected by Rolly. Authorities estimate that 11,000 houses were battered by the typhoon, while hundreds of millions were lost in damaged crops. Initial reports say that at least 6 residents were killed by the typhoon, 62 were injured, while 1 is still missing. The Social Welfare Department has already procured relief goods for the residents, but the agency is afraid that not everybody will receive supplies.
Badly hit itong Catanduanes. Halos yata lahat ng structures dumapa. Based sa initial report, 60% ng mga houses dito ay parang nasira dahil karamihan kasi made of wood. Unang pangangailangan dito is pagkain kasi kung nag-ikot kami kanina dito, walang bukas na grocery, yung market bagsak. Kaya ayun ang unang hinahanap ng tao. Kaya ayun ang una naming pinorward.
For now, air assets are flying to and from the island to distribute provisions.
Para mabilis natin na ma-address yung pag-transport ng mga kailangan ng Catanduanes at yung mga equipment na kailangan ng Catanduanes ay madala kaagad natin from mainland to the island of Catanduanes.
Authorities are also trying to seek additional help from outside. This as they try to re-establish communication lines with the mainland Bicol. Rabi, the Catanduanes LGU is appealing to telco companies to expedite the restoration of their services in the island. Apart from the scarcity of food and water, they say communication line will do hips as they try to bounce back. Robbie?
Maraming salamat, Romel. That was Romel Lopez reporting live in Catanduanes. Tropical Storm Rolly is still on its way outside the Philippine area of responsibility after leaving heavy damage in southern Luzon. Data from Pag-asa show that as of 3 p.m. today, Rolly is slowly moving west. It's expected to exit the Philippine area of responsibility tonight. Tropical Storm Shawnee, meanwhile, was last spotted 620 kilometers east of Basco, Batanes. Shawnee will likely remain stationary away from the country's landmass for the next 2 days before possibly making landfall in the extreme northern Luzon area between Thursday to Friday. Pag-asa says Shawnee may still change track to pass through northern Luzon provinces. Many communities, especially in the Bicol region, are still reeling from Rolly's widespread impact. As of 3 p.m. today, the NDRRMC says the death toll from Typhoon Rolly has reached 17, with 1 reported from Calabarzon, 16 from the Bicol region. In a separate report, the Office of Civil Defense for Region 5 said casualties in their region had reached at least 20. The NDRRMC is still validating this figure. The Office of Civil Defense also reported that as of last night, almost 96,000 families, more than around 360,000 individuals in the Bicol region had been displaced by Rolly, with 77,000 families still in evacuation centers. More than 76,000 houses in the region were damaged. 20,000 of those were totally damaged. In terms of infrastructure, in Region 5, damage was pegged at 4.6 billion pesos so far. Now, in an interview on Radio 5, the DPWH said they are still set to assess the situation this week to come up with a figure on the overall cost of infrastructure damage.
Yung Region 5 po, dun po yung pinaka-substantial. All in all po, including buildings, mga 4.6 billion pesos.
Wow.
And for Region 8, ang total po is about 22 million pesos. So ang total po natin ngayon is about 5.7.
The DOTR also says that airports in Legazpi, Naga, and Virac have all resumed operations. DOTR Secretary Arthur Tagadi described Rolly's damage to these local airports as minimal. The Agriculture Department, meanwhile, said that damage to agriculture caused by both Quinta and Rolly totaled to around 4.5 billion pesos. The Department of Agriculture notes, though, that this could still go up.
Sa ngayon, halos magkaparehas na sila, 2.5 sa Typhoon Quinta and around 2 billion na sa Rolly. Dahil initial assessment pa lang ng Rolly, baka mas malaki ang nila impact, especially talagang malaki ang tama dito sa Bicol region.
The province of Albay was still reeling from the devastation of Typhoon Quinta when Rolly ravaged the province over the weekend. Typhoon-hit towns are now ailing for help as funds run dry. Jenny Dongon gives us more details live from Legazpi City in Albay. Jenny, how's the situation there?
Robbie, towns here in the province of Albay are appealing for immediate help to cope with the destruction brought by Super Typhoon Rolly. Residents are still struggling with power outages, lack of communication line, water interruptions, and now officials said they are running out of funds.
Emily's house used to stand here, but after Rolly's wreaked havoc in most parts of Albay province on Sunday, within 10 minutes, this is all that's left. A house without a roof and walls to shelter her household. From the evacuation center where they have been staying since last weekend, Emily saw how her house was blown out by the strong winds of the monstrous typhoon and how her life as a single parent to 3 children has just drastically changed.
Wala nang bahay namin. Paano po kami babangon eh? Wala kaming kapera-pera.
Meanwhile, Raquel Dineros can still recall how she tried to save some of her family belongings that Sunday morning. But the sudden rise of floodwaters forced her to abandon her plan and leave her house.
Kumbaga saan yung faith na lang po namin kung hanggang saan yung tatag namin. Kung saan, paano kami bangon, sino tutulong sa amin, hindi namin alam.
Of the 53 barangays in the town of Awas, only 15 have been reached by the local government. Most affected areas are buried in thick mud, making roads impassable.
Intensity ng tubig talagang grabe at saka yung volume napakalaki. So hindi na kinaya ng ating mga dike, kaya talagang yung iba nag-overflow, yung iba naman bumigay. So yung tendency nung ilog, pumunta dito sa amin yung ilog.
To this day, residents still don't know how they can move forward, with water and power supplies cut off and communication lines still down. Some residents chose to stay along the roads as they seek help from passing officials and strangers. The UAS local government admits that they need immediate assistance from the national government and from the private sector as their funds have started to run dry.
Pondo ng LGU, almost naubos na ho sa pandemic. So ngayon tumama pa po to, talagang hirap na ho kami. So kung mayroon mga agencies o kaya naman mga private company na gustong tumulong, mayroon ho kami help desk na linagay sa aming munisipyo.
The town of Santo Domingo is suffering the same fate. Aside from power outages, the town's water system has also been damaged. Basud Bridge, which connected the first and second districts of Albay, was also destroyed. The town's officials and residents are appealing for aid as they have yet to recover from the devastation brought by Typhoon Quinta.
More or less mga 90% na wash out tayo. And again, yung problema natin sa kuryente, we have to buy new ones. And alam po na natin millions yung amount ng pipes natin. So di natin alam kung saan tayo kukuha, especially naubos na yung calamity fund.
Robbie, due to the severe damage in the primary lines and facilities, officials said it may take a month or two to restore the water or the electric electric supply here in the province. Robbie.
Maraming salamat, Jenny Dongon, reporting live from Legazpi City. Following the onslaught of Rolly, Rescue 5 and Alagang Kapatid Foundation distributed relief items to farmers and their families in Quezon Province. 60 families from the coastal barangay of San Roque in Lopez, Quezon received food packs and hygiene kits from Tulong Kapatid and partner organizations Latter-day Saints Charities, Nivea Philippines, IPI, and Armature. The group also gave out food packs, vitamins, and liniment to more than 100 families in Barangay Ligpit, Bantayan in Ginayangan, Quezon. Families in both barangays are relying on agriculture, but their crops were heavily damaged by back-to-back typhoons Quinta and Rolly. To help those affected by the typhoon, you may donate food items and non-food items at our drop-off centers. The addresses are being flashed on your screen right now. For cash donations, you may deposit any amount to any of the bank accounts flashed on your screen. We'll go for a quick break. When the big story returns. For experts and Albay officials, the move to suspend quarrying activities in the province may have been done in haste. Find out why. And the Supreme Court is finally taking action as they set a schedule to narrow down issues in the 37 legal challenges against the anti-terror law. Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. Environment officials say quarrying activities near Mayon Volcano may have caused the landslide in Albay during Typhoon Rolly's destruction. But a geologist thinks otherwise. Shaila Francisco explains.
The Environment Department has suspended all quarrying operations around Mayon Volcano following the landslide in Albay during the onslaught of Typhoon Rolly. The order comes as President Duterte instructed the DNR and DPWH to probe the complaints of residents who blamed quarrying activities for the accidents in the area. In a meeting last night, the DNR disclosed that some quarry operators left stockpiles in the middle of the rivers, which were then swept away by the floodwaters from the volcano. The stockpiles, along with the lahar, then reached residential areas and caused the death of some residents based on the department's initial investigation. The DNR added that some quarry operators went beyond the restricted areas.
Na baka may mga quarry operators na doon na sila nagko-quarry sa taas. Pag nag-quarry ka kasi doon sa taas, unstable yon. When heavy rains come, talagang may tendency na magkaroon ng landslide.
A geologist agrees with Bichara. He explained that the huge rocks which buried several houses in Albay came from Mayon's volcanic deposits. Some of these even date back to its eruption in 2018.
Kung quarrying yon, di dapat nabawasan yung mga material na tatabon doon sa ginubatan. Nakita natin, no, natabunan yung mga bahay, no, at mga buhangin, at nandun sa taas niya ay mga malalaking bato. That is what we call as boulder-rich na debris flows or boulder-rich na lahars kasi nga volcanic material. Yun, so tingin ko, ano yan, hindi naman sa walang kinalaman, pero malamang sa hindi, ang dahilan talaga or ang main factor dyan ay yung supply ng tubig na dinala ng bagyong Rolly.
In an interview with One News, Albay Governor Al Francis Bichara said they will comply with the order. However, he expressed doubt that the quarrying caused the mudslides. He also warned against outrightly suspending the operations.
Pag dinigil lahat ng quarry, walang supply ng mga aggregates. So, titigil din namin yung mga constructions dito. They should have conducted first an investigation. In the first place, when I was discussing things with the DPWH engineers and the LCD, according to them, yung source ng lahar galing sa itaas, hindi galing sa quarry areas.
For FIVOX, both the DNR and the Albay provincial government have valid points. The agency explains the deposits washed away are too many to have been caused by quarry alone.
Yung quarry, kailangan din nating i-disenyo ng tama. Kasi posible naman yung quarry, kapag hindi maayos, ay ma-divert, no? Ma-divert yung flow. Papunta sa isang lugar na dapat hindi muna tamaan kung hindi na apektuhan yung configuration ng ilog.
FIVOX is now calling on the local government to inspect quarry operations, particularly its design and location to prevent similar incidents. For its part, the Alianza Tigil Mina is urging the DNR to review all mining and quarry contracts and ensure that climate change assessment is now included. This as more typhoons are to be expected with the onset of La Nina.
Kapag hindi in-update itong mga environmental impact assessment na to, dadami yung mga posibleng dumami yung mga mine accidents.
The DNR targets to wrap up the investigation in less than a month, given the impact of supply of construction materials in the region. The investigation will look into whether some local government and DNR officials, as well as quarry operators, failed in their duties to prevent the landslide. Shaila Francisco, we are One News.
And these are the other big stories today. The Office of the Solicitor General has backed yet again the electoral protest of former Senator Bongbong Marcos against Vice President Leni Robredo. In its comment, the OSG said the Presidential Electoral Tribunal, or PET, can nullify votes or declare a failure of elections, that this will not infringe upon the authority of the Commission of Elections, or COMELEC. The OSG, however, clarified that PET cannot call for special elections. Marcos' full protest urges the Supreme Court that sits as the Electoral Tribunal to nullify votes from 3 Mindanao provinces due to alleged massive fraud. Annulling votes from Maguindanao, Basilan, and Lanao del Sur would effectively wipe out Robredo's lead in the vice presidential polls. Finally, the preliminary hearing on the anti-terror law has been set. That's for November 26. There are 37 petitions challenging the controversial measure. The Supreme Court Preliminary Conference would narrow down common issues for faster disposition of the cases. The High Court, however, has yet to schedule oral arguments. In Senate hearings today, defense officials again denied red tagging certain individuals. They insisted that they were merely exposing communist-linked groups to protect the public. Mayon Volcano with the story.
Lieutenant General Antonio Parlate continued to deny claims of red tagging of celebrities during the Senate hearing today.
Have you in any way red tagged Ms. Liza Soberano, Eddie Locsin, and Catriona Gray?
No, Your Honor. I did not.
The military official instead stuck to the narrative that he was instead trying to defend actresses like Liza Soberano from netizens who were red tagging them.
She said nothing about being threatened or being in danger for speaking in that forum. But it's the netizens who are actually tagging her as a communist, as a terrorist. That is why they are asking the supporters to boycott her programs.
Several lawmakers have called out Parlade for warning celebrities of suffering the same fate as skilled activists if they get associated with communist groups.
We have to be very careful with the words that we pronounce. Being spokesperson of this entity, of this task force, carries a lot of weight. And to say that Liza Soberano should stop doing what she's doing, otherwise she will end up being killed like some other activist, I think was uncalled for.
National Security Advisor Secretary Hermogenes Esperon meanwhile clarified that red tagging is not a matter of policy within the NTF-ELCAC program. National Intelligence Coordinating Agency Director General Alex Monteagudo insisted that they are mandated to inform and protect public against supposed members of communist groups.
We are exposing individuals and organizations which we have validated as CPP, NDF, NPA members and front organizations. We therefore plead guilty, not to red tagging, but to truth tagging.
During the hearing, Senate President Tito Soto asked about alleged rape and other sexual abuses being committed by NPA leaders to their subordinates. Lady Desiree Miranda, who was the former chairman of Anakbayan Central Luzon, testified before the committee.
Yes po, Mr. Senate President. Isa po ako sa buhay na patunay ng pang-aabuso sa loob ng kilusan. Not just once, but thrice.
Mga kasama ninyo o mga opisyal?
Officer po, mga commander po namin.
Meanwhile, representatives from the Makabayan bloc did not attend today's Senate hearing, though they sent a lawyer to read their statement, which included a request to senators that they should not allow their committee to be a venue for red tagging by government or security officials.
Naninindigan kami na hindi mariyuyurakan ng anumang bintang at kasinungalingan ang kredibilidad ng Makabayan. Hindi kailanman mapapawi ng anumang red tagging ang track record ng mga militanteng organisasyon ng mamamayan.
The bloc also insisted that since their inclusion in the lower house, they have been able to succeed in fighting for programs which benefited the public, like salary increase and free education. Reporting for News 5, Mayan Los Baños, we are One News.
Let's pause for another break. When we return, voting has finally started in the United States and it is already a landslide win for Biden, at least in one small town of 5. But how exactly will 2 million Filipinos in the U.S. vote? Find out after the break. You're still watching The Big Story. Americans are set to hit polling booths today to vote for their next leader, a choice between re-electionist President Donald Trump and Democrat candidate former Vice President Joe Biden. Voters had their last chance Monday for the early casting of ballots, just as presidential hopefuls made their last-ditch effort to secure battleground states like Michigan. Voting precincts opened shortly after midnight in some areas like Dixville Notch in New Hampshire, whose 5 residents voted unanimously for Biden. Trump, on the other hand, slammed the Supreme Court-backed extension to accept absentee ballots in 2 key battleground states, Pennsylvania and North Carolina. Trump had won the two states along with Wisconsin and Michigan back in 2016, but opinion polls now suggest the tables have turned in these areas in favor of Biden.
And when the Supreme Court gave you an extension, they made a very dangerous situation. You have to have a date. You can't extend dates.
Ahead of Election Day, Biden campaigned in Ohio and blasted Trump for downplaying the pandemic and his comments suggesting to have infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci fired after the elections.
Last night, Trump went on to say he was going to fire Dr. Fauci. Well, I've got a better idea. Let's fire Trump and I'll hire Fauci.
The Phil-Am community in the United States is also seen as a driving force in their own right in the U.S. election. But the minority bloc might be leaning towards Trump's side. Camille Samonte tells us why.
Around 2 million Filipino Americans in the U.S. are eligible to vote in the 2020 U.S. elections. That's according to U.S.-based think tank Pew Research Center. There are 11 million Asian American voters in the U.S., with Filipino Americans accounting for the second largest pie in the minority voting bloc. It goes without saying, their vote matters in picking the next president, which is a choice between Democratic candidate Joe Biden and Republican re-electionist President Donald Trump. Biden and his running mate Kamala Harris have been courting Filipino Americans to vote blue these elections. The former U.S. Vice President tweeted his support for Filipino Americans during their History Month last October. He promised Filipino Americans protection alongside American people. Other efforts include a digital campaign video called The America We Love, wherein Harris' speech at the Democratic National Convention was translated in Filipino and 8 other Asian languages. A Democratic supporter believes that Phil-Ams will greatly benefit if Biden wins the election.
Filipino community is part of the minority dito sa bansa na to. So if nagkaroon at least ng some type of unity and not unlike what's happening now, magbe-benefit yung mga Filipino dito. Doon ako naniniwala. In terms of job and being treated well.
On the other hand, Trump's campaign did not specifically reach the Phil-Am community. Still, he has a solid group of supporters among Phil-Ams. A group called Raise the Phil-Am Voice for Trump gathered thousands of Phil-Ams in 21 cities and 15 states last month to support the current president. Pew Research Center also found out that 77% of Filipinos have high confidence in Trump.
If there's any other president who could, do better than how President Trump is handling things right now. I can't imagine kung manalo yung kabila. Kasi nakikita nyo naman kung anong sinusuporta nila yung BLM. There's always looting na nangyayari, riot. So, we don't support that. Of course, we're not going to support that. So, just imagine kung sila yung nanalo and then ito-tolerate nila yung ano na mangyayari dito sa Amerika.
A political analyst said many Phil-Ams will vote depending on the candidate's economic agenda.
A stable economy and law and order are very important issues, no? Because that will make sure that they continue to have jobs, that they continue to rise in terms of socioeconomic class, and for them, Trump's given the myth of his being a successful businessman. Will take care of the U.S. economy. So, yung economic voting is very important among Filipino Americans.
Malacanang has distanced itself from the U.S. elections. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said it's up to the Americans on who to elect as their president. But earlier this year, President Rodrigo Duterte urged Phil-Ams to support the re-election of Trump, whom he refers to as his close friend. For News 5, Camille Samonte, we are One News.
Now, unlike here in the Philippines, where we directly cast our ballots to vote our chosen leaders, U.S. citizens have a more indirect role in choosing their next president and vice president. Let's find out more about the U.S. electoral system with this report by Jovi Francisco.
I think we can all agree it's been a long campaign. But tomorrow,
you get to pick our next president.
Democrat presidential candidate Hillary Clinton garnered over 65 million votes back in the 2016 U.S. presidential elections. That's more than 3 million votes than what her opponent, then Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump, received. But why was Trump proclaimed as the 45th president of the U.S. and not Clinton? It has everything to do with the unique voting system in the U.S. called Electoral College. In most democratic countries, like here in the Philippines, the candidate who gets the most number of votes among the presidential hopefuls wins the coveted position. But in the U.S., their constitution states that their president will be elected through electoral colleges. It is made up of delegates from each U.S. state. There are a total of 538 electoral votes. The number of electors per state is based on the number of representatives in their Congress. And those numbers are based on its population. So that means a voter does not directly choose their preferred candidate. But they are voting on who their electors should pick. Trump or Biden must lock 270 electors, more than half of the total, to secure their win. California has the most number of electors with 55. But this doesn't mean that the western state is a target of presidential candidates. They usually woo voters who are in the so-called swing states, where a candidate can win by swing in votes. According to the New York Times, the swing states for the 2020 elections are Florida, Georgia, Maine 2nd District, North Carolina, Ohio, and Texas. With 29 electors, Florida is the largest battleground between Trump and Biden. The southeastern state, where most Hispanic voters are registered, surprised America when it turned red in the 2016 polls, giving Trump his needed boost to garner 270 electors. Biden's team booked $17 million in ads in Florida for the last 15 days of the campaign, in attempts to make the state blue again. On the other hand, Trump's team only spent $4 million in ads in the same state. Latest polls are indicating that Biden is leading the competition. But with the Electoral College system in place, it can still be anyone's game. Jovi Francisco, we are One News.
And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow, 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News. Good evening.